Hello, I'm Jasper Morris, and this is Inside Burgundy, the best place to learn about all the wines, the vines, and the vignerons of wonderful Burgundy. This podcast is a recording from a live event. Good evening, everybody. At Ben's Winery, and you will see behind us, if we move aside, that is the Isle of Wight, Cowes, because this room also serves as the unofficial headquarters of the Royal Yacht Squadron in Burgundy. So, Ben, tell us a bit about your background, how you got to be here.
I got to be here. So, first of all, we were looking at the island of Wight. I got here slightly because of you, Jasper, because you created the opportunity between me and my business partner, Ian, but to meet at one of your tasting. So that was back in
January 2007.
Yeah. And so
it started a little earlier than that. How did you get into wine in the first place? So you're local. You don't come from a wine family.
No. I'm definitely a local because I was born in Beaune, a bit before 2007, just a bit before. So no, I was born in Beaune in 75. Grew up in Beaune, but not from a grower family. My parents had a flower shop, so very very different. Anyway, by living here, I was like, of course, confronted. I had a lot of wine around me, thanks to my parents, and good wine, and I really loved it from a pretty young age. So, like from, at 13, I started to have an interest. At 15, I was pretty sure that it was the area I was wanting to study. So I went to the wine school at 15 and carry on until I was 23 and travel a lot to gain some experience. And luckily, right after my study, I was hired by Contarmant, where I spent 15 years. So from 99 to 2014, but in between I created here. So the wine you're going to taste tonight from 2007. So for 7 years, I was like running both winery, small estate in Pommard, 7 hectares. And here at the beginning, it was a pure négoce. So only buying fruits and bit by bit, we purchased vineyards. We also rented vineyards. So today we carry on buying fruit, so mostly in the Côte de Nuit, and the Côte de Beaune is a majority coming from the estate. So I think tonight Batard Montrachet will be part of those area because it was the first vine we purchased in 2009, and today we have a bit more than 9 hectares.
And what's the balance overall, including purchases between red and white?
The balance is about 50-50. So I'm producing in terms of, let's say, volume, half. In terms of appellation, slightly more appellation in red than white.
But all the vineyards you own, or most of the vineyards you own, are whites.
Yep, correct. 1.5 hectare in Pinot and a bit more than 7.5 in Chardonnay.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So what we've got are 3 little flights of pairs of white, followed by a trio of mixed reds, and then you've got the vertical of Les Amoureuses. So do you have the first 2 wines in front of you, I think? Yes? What I can see, or about to. And obviously they're wide apart in age. But Ben, tell us about the 2 vineyards.
The 2 vineyards, funny enough, those 2 appellations, I started to make them the same vintage. So Tete du Clos and Meursault Le Porusot arrived in my range in 2009. So you're about to taste my first Meursault Le Porusot. But I discovered Tete du Clos, the same vintage. Well, I knew of course, about these specific vineyards, but the two vineyards I really love because they do have, in my sense, like a kind of a tannic side. So we don't talk much about tannin in white. I don't know if you agree with that.
True.
But they have a phenolic aspect, and they're usually aging super well. Porusot from the range of Premier Cru I'm making is really the one which is not the most instinctive when they're young, but they really age super well. So I hope the 2009 test as well as it is at the winery, because that's a wine I really love. For Tete du Clos, it's a bit special because in Chassagne Montrachet, Tete du Clos is not a label you see a lot. Tete du Clos could be called Meursault, so that's part of the big range of Premier Cru you can call Meursault, but that's the top of the appellation. This is just beneath La Romanée. It's alongside Ruchotte and Grande Ruchotte, which is to me one of the greatest places in Chassagne. So at the winery, we have a nickname for this Chassagne. We call it Baby Grand Cru. So it's not Grand Cru level every vintage, but when it works, it's really like rocking.
Okay, and we got two vintages. 2017, which I think we're all agreed is one of the really lovely years for white Burgundy, and in my experience is pretty much fully ready now. And 2009, which didn't get the fame at the time, but I've always absolutely believed in it as one of the greats, as long as you picked early enough. So it actually brings me to a question for you, Ben. I've really got two questions about making white wine. One is, how do you manage ripeness? Between, obviously, you want to wait till the grapes are ripe, but these days it's quite difficult to stop them getting too ripe. And the other question, which might be related, is what do you feel about the reductive character in white wine making?
No. Alors, first question. Of course, you have to pick at the optimal ripeness. What we are facing today is that the window of picking is much smaller than it used to be. Mostly because we pick late August or early September, so the days are still longer than mid-September. They're warmer, and when I've started making wine, like let's say the window of picking for a grape variety could be like a week to 10 days. Now it's more likely to be 4 or 5 days max. So the only difference is we have to be equipped in terms of logistic. Let's say if you're running 10 hectares, you have to be equipped like for 20 hectares. So we have more pickers. We have more capacity in terms of logistic in the winery. We have cold room now that we're renting. So picking at the right ripeness for me today. I mean, we have sorted it by just having more logistic. That's as simple as that.
And do you find it's easy enough to get the producers to pick at the right time, or do you have that?
But producer, I mean, we picking ourselves.
Oh, it's your own
vineyard, so,
right.
But it's manageable. It's manageable, but at the same time, we're losing one thing. Is I love to do the harvest before, for the, let's say, for the ambiance, when you have you have a team of 25 people, and voila, you can spend time with them. Now, I mean, not in 24, but in 23, we had to hire 100 pickers. So that's a bit different. It's not the same logistic in terms of of human relationship, but it works. It works pretty fine. And something in the winery, we had to be 15 when normally we are half of that. So yeah, for a small company, we used to be 10 people full time. It's a bit strange to suddenly for a week being 120.
Mm.
But
Okay. And 2 words on the Meursault Le Porusot vineyard.
Meursault Le Porusot. Alors, this is Le Porusot. So if you look at the map, it's the top and south side of Porusot. This was an old vine. I'm saying was because this vine's been pulled out. So I haven't produced Meursault Porusot now since 4 years. It will come back hopefully next year in the range. But this vine at the time was over 80 years old. Lots of small berry, what we call mirandage, so very concentrated berry, and I think you can feel it in the wine. I wish I was tasting the same wine as you actually tonight.
Right. What are we tasting? We have a glass of white wine in front of us.
It's should we do it blind? It's the one they're gonna taste. So it's not the two first, but it's one of the
others. Okay.
One of the others.
Okay. Well, we'll wait and see. I'll think about that.
And about reduction, you ask about
Yes.
the reductive side. The reductive side is, I think it's fine if it's not a technical reduction. My meaning is, if you aspire to have reduction by using sulfur, it's not the type of reduction I really like on white. But if it's like more on playing with the lees, with the amount of lees, and if it's from a terroir because you have like let's say can we say sulfuric reduction or the sulfur reduction, and you have the mineral reduction, which is for me slightly different.
So you don't do anything especially to encourage it?
I don't do anything to encourage it, but I've got some wine which will naturally do it all the time in bottle after 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Such as Meursault Vireil, for example. Meursault Genévrière won't do it, but Meursault Charme sometimes
will do it. But
yeah.
The Charme is fatter and richer, so it can cope with it.
Mm.
So may I ask how the first 2 wines are showing with you? Because we aren't tasting exactly the same wine.
I thought the 17 Tete du Clos is wonderful.
Texture on the palate.
Texture is fantastic. Wine is fresh as a daisy, glorious. The Meursault is what's the right word? Very round and very ripe. Is it maybe advanced, slightly advanced? No, or is it just very ripe? It's very ripe.
Yeah, a bit more tropical.
It is.
So the reason why I chose this. So the reason why, I was looking on the Berry Brothers BBX website, because there's like a deep treasure trove of Ben's wines on that. And I still remember when I was with Ben in his cellar the last time, he served a Navo 07, which I thought was exquisite. So then I was trying to find that, but no unfortunate person was willing to sell their allocation of that. But I found this. So I thought, why don't we share a bit of Ben in the early days and Ben today? But yeah,
I think it's showing well. I think
it's showing quite well, actually. It's just maybe the riper side of 09 versus the beauty of the 17.
I think the Tete du Clos is exceptional.
Yeah. But Jasper, you always recommend
it. It's been a favorite of mine.
To us.
In fact, I bought a 6-pack of the 9 and of the 10 back in the day, but I think I've drunk them. Okay, well, look, we don't have a vast amount of time to stay with you. We'll need to leave just before 8 o'clock your time. So maybe we should look. You should now have a pairing of Corton Charlemagne 2020 and 2014. And so they were the same source of grapes? Not right.
They were not the same source of grape. So, but I mean, you're still in the same area, and you're in Charlemagne, of course. 2014, it's normally 100% Pernod Vergelès. So you're on the cold side and on a pretty fresh vintage, zesty vintage like 14. I can give you a clue, Jasper. We are tasting a 14.
We are. Aha.
And and the 2020 is coming from Pernod and Alos Corton. So there's an addition since I think 16 or 17 of Corton Les Languettes, which is the top of the hill in Alos Corton, southeast facing, but just beneath the forest. So a pretty cool place. It's a place I really like. I made some Charlemagne 100% from Languette, which I really appreciate. Depending on which village you are, I mean, I was in Alos Corton the other day, and they said, because at the moment you see some label just naming Le Charlemagne, and in Alos Corton they're saying the real Charlemagne is coming from their village. When you're in Pernod, they're saying it's coming from their villages.
Yes.
In Ladois, they're not too loud about that, but.
Yes, there is a movement at the moment that started with Domaine La Vougerie, but now Bonneau du Martret and a couple of others are using a different appellation. They have switched out of Corton Charlemagne into a separate appellation called Charlemagne, which effectively does the same thing on the same territory, but it's an alternative choice. And you used to find people who would label something called Corton Charlemagne Le Charlemagne, or you could have had Corton Charlemagne Les Languettes or something like that. But the authorities don't like that anymore and told people to stop doing it. So we have two absolute favourite vintages of mine, both of which I think are potentially grander than 2017. If we take 2014 first, I think we knew at the start it was a wonderful vintage. Yeah. And then it seemed to get younger and younger and younger for several years. So in fact, I don't own as much as I would like to own of 2014, but I'm hardly starting them yet. Even though it's 10, 11 years old, because it's a vintage of crystalline clarity. It didn't work nearly so well in red, but in white, it was just about perfect, and you had a wide window of picking dates. It didn't really make a difference. 2020, of course, one of the great recent hot, dry years, when the reds rather suffered, but could be great, and the whites are actually, I think, really successful pretty much everywhere. It's a richer, weightier vintage than 2014, but it does still have that core of acidity that you want. And I think it's a vintage with a really, really good long-term look at.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And 2020 from Bourgogne to Grand Cru, even the Aligoté in 20 was amazing. It's the difference between 14 and 20. I mean, I always say that, I mean, if you came to the cellar, but it seems easy to say that Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are not the same variety, but of course they don't, I mean, every year there's one performing better than the other. So in 14, it was definitely Chardonnay over Pinot Noir, even if I really like the Reds 14 now, but it's definitely a vintage for white. In 20, I was really believing on the red first, but then the white really became the shiny star of the cellar. The reds are nice. They have a lot of concentration, but we don't have the consistency of the white in the vintage. So for me, 2020 is white also.
And it might be something as simple that the black grapes attracted the sun and the heat, and the white grapes reflected it. I don't know. It's the only way I've thought of to explain why the whites are uniformly so successful.
Somehow that was one of your first questions, saying, how hard it is to pick at the right ripeness. To me, I mean, today, I mean, we've started debudding. We're not even in May, and I mean, things can change. Of course, if we have a bad weather, but next week it's not supposed to be bad. So basically, we were ahead. It's carry on this way. We're going to pick end of August, but it's much easier to pick the white at the right ripeness today than the reds.
Yes.
So that's.
Over to you then, for anyone who'd like to comment on the two Corton Charlemagnes, 2020 and 2014.
No, the 2020 is spectacular, truly spectacular, incredibly chiseled. Is the first thing that came to mind. It has much more sort of citrus mineral fruit coming through. like my physique. That's wobbly. No, but really, it reminds me almost like of Bon Martha Red, and it really actually just slowly builds up in the glass, and particularly on the palate. You have that structure around it, but the tension and the layers of fruit is, yeah, very, very impressed. I'm so impressed. I actually haven't tasted the 14 yet. So.
Good start. Anyone want to speak about the 14?
But Ben, these are exactly the same source and grapes in 14 and 20? No change, right?
No. There's in the 20 you also have a Languette from Alos Corton. When in the 14 it's 100% Pernod.
I understand. And do you think the mixing enhances the complexity?
That's my idea. It's to because Charlemagne is such a complex, appellation to describe, because it's covering 3 villages and with very, very various exposure. The geology is, let's say, fairly similar, but you have variation from like mid slope to top slope. But I mean, it's probably more. It's probably the geology's got probably less impact than the exposure and voilà. So that's for me. I used to like Charlemagne with the Pernod Vergelès side, so the cold side, but with Alos Corton, I think we have another dimension with.
Exactly the word I was going to use, dimension. But, that's good news. Anyway, so of the two, the 2020 is the preferred wine, even drunk at this stage when it's still in its youth.
It's showing very well. I would just say, I guess this is one of the advantages, Ben, that you have, is that you can tweak the formula, whereas the main guys who own their vineyards are like fixated on certain space. Every year in, year out, right?
I mean, you're totally right, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing now. I'm owning vineyards, but when you buy vineyards, you take what is offered to you. That's also the reason why I don't want to separate the label. It's mostly because sometimes, with the help of another site, you're creating a better wine. So I don't want to restrain myself by doing estate, maison, domaine. I had the case when I was at Contarmant. The Volnay village was a very difficult wine to make every year for me until I bought another vineyard just above, not far from the first one. And the two together were making a great wine. And I said, I should have bought fruit for the last 6 years just to make a better wine, because I didn't like the wine I was making from these single vineyards, from the first few years. But sometimes it's better to be able to play with the terroir.
Right. And we're now going to look at 2 versions of the 2014 Batard Montrachet. I don't know. Have you been told which is which, or are they being served without you knowing? So just to recap for those who are less sure, Ben offered all his importers the choice between the wine under cork or the wine under screw cap. And in the UK, I was then the buyer at Berries, and I took everything under screw cap, including the Batard Montrachet, the whole way up. And there's a logic to this. So many people who might dabble with a little bit of screw cap say, well, we'll put it on the entry level wines because they're more for casual opening and people don't need the special feature of the cork. But if your reason for not using a cork is because you don't trust the cork, you think that you have too big a risk of spoilage, then it's much more important to take the Grand Cru out of cork, because that's the one that will be sitting in the bottle untouched for the longest time. So that was my point of view anyway, and Ben is perhaps the only producer who has expressed this point of view. Makes perfect sense to me. So I'll leave you a minute or two to play with those two, and then unless you've got something to add.
Maybe Ben can comment which markets got the screw cap and which markets got the cork.
So in the end, so my first idea was like at the time it was not for TCA or corked taste. It was mostly for pre-mops at a time where let's say few people were talking about it, but not many people were acting. The only way people could act was like rising up the level of sulfur, which I was not very keen on. And I did start to use screw cap at Clos St Denis in 2004, so I had a bit of experience there. So anyway, when England was the first the two first market to really express, the wish of having all the whites in screw cap was UK with Jasper and Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Australia, you understand why. I mean, they used to have screw cap through all the wine, even the top wine. So that was fairly easy for them. But then the US from 2015, so 100%. Scandinavia for one part, and Japan.
But not France, not most of the rest of Europe.
France, no.
Never.
Alors today, de toute façon, we don't use natural cork for white anymore since 2017. We kept a few experiments, but definitely since 15, we almost have no natural cork. So it's either diam or screw cap.
So the Batard Montrachet is, I think Ben mentioned earlier, the first vineyard that they were able to buy. It took a while negotiating that from memory. What was your first vintage of Batard?
Alors, the first vintage of Batard, which was 100% from this vineyard, was 2013. But I'm making Batard since 2009. Where we had because at the time there was still a farmer on the vine, and I was like doing a bit of purchase next to this vineyard. But since we took over the farming, it's 100%. So the first 100% from these vineyards with like a year of farming from us is 2014. So you have the first vintage, which is really estate. 100% estate wine.
And so now the question is, what do you think, tasting the two side by side?
Jasper, I think this is a fascinating comparison. And when I saw these two cases come up for sale, I immediately grabbed them. And I think we're bottle 2 of the 6-bottle case. So I'm looking forward to keep going through. But also, just to clarify, these are both domain owned, and the same vineyards, right? Between the two, it's just
entirely the same wine. It's only at the bottling.
It's from the same tank.
Fascinating.
And the tank is very small. Was very small.
Well,
there's a clear winner.
Yeah,
well, the screw cap is super fresh tonight. The cork, you can see the evolution more than the screw cap. I guess the question is the screw cap a bit like going to space? Are you trapped in time? Because is there much oxygen flow in the screw cap versus the cork?
You can adjust. You can adjust the seal, but it's the most important is the oxygen, which is already dissolved in the wine, and the headspace. So you have more headspace with screw cap. My experience is that the screw cap will age slower, so it should taste younger than the cork. So probably like the Batard 14 with cork will be like maybe at its peak in 10 years time. It's what we are drinking actually.
Yes.
So we have an example here with the screw cap. it might take another 20 years.
I don't know. No, I don't think many of you, I think probably Adam, certainly Michael, maybe one or two more, were at the event we did at AMI when we served them blind. And we were 22 people on that occasion. And I don't think people even knew that the blind was between a cork and a screw cap. I think they just knew they were both from Batard 2014, plus a third example that didn't get any votes. But on the evening, of the 22 people, 21 people, without knowing, voted in favour of the screw cap, and one person voted in favour of the cork, which was pretty amazing. And the cork bottle was in excellent condition. There was nothing faulty about it. It was just that more crystalline character in the screw cap was what won the day. But I think
everybody here, Jasper, I think everybody votes for the screw cap. Screw cap today. Oh no, one person, just like the last one. One person is caught.
Is that Charlie?
What I do notice is that it feels a little more advanced than the 14 Corton Charlemagne. It really does feel, even in the colour of the wine, it does feel more advanced.
Interestingly, this is the wine that Ben served me without telling me what it is. And when it was first served, the colour was quite advanced, and it seemed quite lush. And I was thinking it was a 2017 and thinking, well, that's fully advanced. However, the longer it stayed in the glass, the younger and fresher it's got. And there's a minerality that's kicked up through the middle, which wasn't immediately evident. And now it's just got younger and younger. So after a while, it was tasting much more like a 2014. And it's sort of going back into its shell. So I think it will last a long time. You've probably only had it in your glass for, well, between 5 and 10 minutes. So if you can keep some back, I think you'll see that tightening up.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's very young.
Yes. You're almost English, Ben.
So I do have a question about, like, so with I heard that you also gone to like the DM corks, right? So how is that compared to, like, cork and screw cap?
The jam, the things you have to know with like with a screw cap, it's usually we use about half the level of sulfur than with a cork. Same thing with diam. So with diam, the only way is to see where it goes through time. We don't have 30 years of experience, but one thing for sure is the experience we have from the last 30 years with cork is not good. It's not good at all, with too much variation. From all the tasting we've done with screw cap, diam, or cork or natural cork, sometimes the best wine is with a cork, but all the time, all the worst bottles are with cork. So that's why I decided to do the switch. I might sacrifice the best bottle with the best cork, but I will avoid 50% of the whole production being the bottle I haven't wished to bottle. So the decision is there, but so far if you technically you're using less sulfur, which is a very good thing, I think, to let the wine express itself. Diam will do exactly the same job as the screw cap. So.
Okay, I think we should just keep things moving. I see you've got the 3 red wines, next 3. So while you taste those, save up your Batard for later on. While you taste those 3 reds, I'll ask Ben to talk a little bit about the vineyards. I think you've been served the Volnay 2010 first, then the Mazoyeres Chambertin 16, and finally Clos St Denis 17. Up to you which order you actually taste them in. You could smell them first and decide. But while you're doing that, I'll get Ben to start with the Clos La Cave des Ducs.
Clos La Cave des Ducs. So Clos La Cave des Ducs is, for us, is an historic appellation because it was part of the range already in 2007 when I've started. Actually, I picked these vineyards in 2006 to secure this vine, in the idea to start my own label in 2007. This is a monopoly, so we do make all the appellation, 0.6 hectares, a bit more than half. It's right on the heart of the village. Most of the time on the map, I don't know on your book, but it's showing as Le Village, which is not easy. Is it like? Yeah, it's a very distinctive vineyard for Volnay. It's for me, it's got like some floral aspect. I think the 2010 should show pretty well. I had this wine 2 months ago, and it was I think at the right stage. And 2010 is such an elegant vintage and lovely vintage, which works pretty well.
Fully ready.
Right.
Yeah. So Clos La Cave des Ducs, just to add something there. So the Dukes of Burgundy had their summer palace in Volnay. So you have the Clos des Ducs of Marquis d'Angeville, which is a monopoly. You have Clos du Château des Ducs of Michel Lafarge, also a monopoly. And you have Clos de la Cave des Ducs, belonging to a family who don't make wine, which Benjamin has the exclusivity on. And this is in elevation, it's higher than the Clos du Château des Ducs, and it's a little bit more sort of within the village, hidden inside, compared to Clos des Ducs.
Yeah, but in terms of geology, because I know sometimes people try to do a flight with Clos des Ducs, Château des Ducs, and Cave des Ducs. Château des Ducs and Clos de la Cave des Ducs have some similarity. Clos des Ducs is really like white soil and stronger in terms of tannin. So different. Then you have Mazoyeres Chambertin. Alors, Mazoyeres today, we call it Charme here now today. I always like, Mazoyeres can be called Charme. But for me, it's got a distinctive character compared to the Charme. But I'm also aware that Mazoyeres is very difficult to pronounce.
I thought you pronounced it very well.
Even in French. It's definitely Burgundian. So for a while, we used to have Charme Chambertin with Mazoyeres on the cork. But now it's purely Charme Chambertin. Anyway, I started with Mazoyeres in 2008. So this parcel is really like almost on the border of Mazoyeres St Denis. So we are the south end of JMIB Chambertin. I like the power it's got. I think it's slightly deeper than a Chambre Chambertin as a character, and I think in 2016, which was small crop, between 15 and 17, let's say cool climate vintage. But I like the freshness of this vintage. Generally speaking, it should show pretty well.
I think they've been showing really well of late. They're still very young, but they don't have too much tannin, and the acidity is all nicely covered by the fruit. So I've been really enjoying 2016s recently, albeit still as a young wine. And the third, which we are also going to taste, is the Clos St Denis. Just wait for Ben and the Coravin to pour out my sample.
I'm not generous, no? Clos St Denis 17. So 17, we talked about the vintage with Tete du Clos. It's let's say I've read a few critics saying it was not the vintage of the century, and it's probably not, but it's a delicious vintage in both color. And I think it's got a long life. It's always tasted well, and it's carry on tasting well. You could definitely have a lot of pleasure now, and but at the same time, I'm sure they're going to age another 10, 15 years easily.
Yes, they've even shut down a tiny bit, but they've been such a useful vintage to drink in restaurant lists. Where here in Burgundy, at any rate, nobody has any old vintages, but there would normally be some 2017s to choose. And they were just very, very open right from the start. It's one of the biggest crops in recent times for red. And in the old days, we would have said, well, you can't ripen your grapes if you crop too much with Pinot Noir. But the thing is, with global warming, at least we do still get ripeness. And so That's one of the reasons why I think now we would rate 2017 better than our expectations were when they were very young. So anyway, you've got the three in front of you. Had a chance to taste them.
And Clos St Denis, something. If you look at the map, you can have a few lieux-dits that you can call Clos St Denis, which are attached to the original vineyards. This is the original vineyards. So if you want to learn about Clos St Denis, this is the heart of the appellation.
Do you still make this, or is that one of the vineyards?
No, I'm still making it.
Yeah.
I'm still making it.
Excellent. So, thoughts from you on these three, and then we'll have a few minutes. We can talk about Amoureuses after that. So, who is the spokesman for the Reds? Anybody like to talk about any of the Reds?
Hello, hi Ben, hi Jasper. Good to see you guys. Yeah, these Reds are really nice, particularly the Mazoyeres, which is just so beautiful right now. The fruit is the nose on this. If you could smell it, is just incredible. It's really showing beautifully right now. Actually, which I find good for 16 because I haven't been drinking a lot of 16s, but it's nice to see one Grand Cru that is so open right now. So that's beautiful. The 2010 Volnay, yeah, I mean that's singing. Very, very typical Volnay. The Clos St Denis for me is just a tiny bit closed right now, but I think it will probably open up in the glass. But the 16 is wow, beautiful.
Is that the vintage or the vineyard?
Yeah, is that the vintage or the vineyard for you, do you think?
Well, it's both.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Or should I say, is that the winemaker?
The vintage is the vintage is like a pretty like the way you describe the Mazoyeres. I mean, most of the 16 I recently were showing the same way. And the flavors are usually very bright, and yeah, you want to keep the glass and just like smell it.
Yeah, but I'm finding this. I mean, I'm not drinking a lot of 16s, but if I happen to have one for whatever reason, I find them very much the way you've just described them. And I just want to say something also about Mazoyeres Chambertin. So as you know, it can be called Charme, it can be called Mazoyeres, and most people do call it Charme. But there is a difference between the two vineyards. The classic Charme is sort of a strawberries and cream, a very rounded, very attractive from the start wine. And I find Mazoyeres has more of a mineral character to it. It's a little bit stonier in its style, crisper and crunchier. And that's why these days I'm really developing an interest in Mazoyeres. And a handful of people who bottle both, Topinamem, Peromino, and a couple of others, I do tend to prefer the Mazoyeres. The Clos St Denis, we have that here in this glass, also.
Yeah, the 17.
And also, it's a little bit closed at the moment. And I think I did mention that I found the 17s, having been so open, have gone just slightly, not hugely, but they've just gone a little bit back into their shell for the moment. But
it's only 7 years old, huh?
Well, exactly. So, I mean, there's no hurry to drink them, even though they have been accessible for a while. It's interesting that a lot of red Burgundy vintages, which we have said will only last 5 or 6 years, like 2000, 2007, and so on, have all kicked on to much longer lives. And there's hardly anything, maybe a few 2004s, but there's hardly anything made since 2000 where you think the vintage needs to have been drunk up.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty which are ready to, but none where you feel it needs to.
Yeah, and even 2003, it's funny, yeah.
No, 2003, years ahead of it, yeah.
Okay. I guess, Jasper, that shows the quality in the winemaking, right?
Absolutely. We have confidence. I'll just tell you the story of how it all started, in fact, because I had been chatting with Ben at the end of the previous year when I was tasting the wines at Corton Charlemagne. And he'd already told me that one day he wanted to start his own business. And he said, we're getting closer. So, I really like to put this into practice pretty soon now. And then in January of '07, my friend Ian Lang, who come along to the Berries January Burgundy tasting, said to me, and he's a venture capitalist and in a good way, and he said to me, Jasper, if you know the bright young man in Burgundy who is really keen to start something but needs a little bit of financial backing, then do please put us in touch. So about an hour later, in a back room at the premises where we were doing the tasting, I put Ian and Ben together, and the rest, as they say, is history. And it's proved to be a wonderful partnership for both sides, which is truly great. So we move on to Les Amoureuses, and we need to leave ourselves time. I don't want to force you into tasting too quickly, but we will talk about it. Ben has got another tasting he needs to look after in just over 5 minutes. So we will also leave time, give him advance warning before we talk about Amoureuses. Ben, there's a question that Michael always asks. If you could have one other vineyard, or in your case, one in white and one in red, which vineyard would you most like to work with? You're not allowed to say Morachet and Remly-Conti.
But I'm allowed to say Amoureuses. That's the thing.
But you've already got Amoureuses to work with. Yeah. So
But,
talk about
Amoureuses, there's one vine's been sold like recently, like last month in Amoureuses, and yeah, it's a shame. I would have liked to acquire one. It's very rare. So if there were another one, and you said not Musigny?
No, I just said not Remly-Conti and not Morachet.
No, Musigny.
Musigny would be your red, and what would your white be?
My white, what's it about?
It doesn't have to be a Grand Cru. It could be.
No. That's why I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But Musigny, I'd love it. In white, I think I'm happy with what I've got actually.
Well, there you go. You wouldn't want a Puligny Premier Cru, or a bit of Grand Cru shot.
Grand Cru shot could be one. Yeah, Grand Cru shot. But I'm happy with what I've got.
Okay, so let's talk about Les Amoureuses, and only in Magnum, because you make what, 1 barrel a year?
1 barrel, yeah.
Yeah. So we've chosen 5 vintages. We left out 2018 because, in fact, I looked through my scores, having tasted all these, and 18 I was a little bit more reticent on. So you've got 15, 16, 17, 19, and 20. But Ben, tell us your thoughts on Amoureuses in general.
But first, it's only in Magnum because the first vintage I made of Amoureuses was 2010. And to make the story short, it's the birthday of my daughter. And as I bought a barrel at Guillaume de Beaune for my first son in 2007, I had to get something for my daughter. So for me, Amoureuses was like the evidence, that the easy choice for a girl. But then, it was the early stage, and even if I've got a very good business partner, it's a business, and I said that's maybe a lot of wine for just one child. So I decided after bottling to sell half the barrel. But as it was for my daughter, I've done everything in Magnum, and that was the first choice. It's a single barrel, but only Magnum for my daughter, and then I carry on every year the same way. So Amoureuses is it's very special. The first time the first time I made one in Chambolle was so different. The terroir is unique. Even when I'm making one in Volnay. I mean, I'm making some in Mazoyeres St Denis with Clos St Denis and Claude Laroche. The touch, the approach, the touch of fruit, the extraction is it's just a fine line, but the balance is very it's very easy and delicate to achieve. I mean, for me as a winemaker, the first time you arrive in Chambolle Musigny, it's a revelation. So I was saying Musigny if I was missing a red, but any vineyard in Chambolle Musigny, I'll be happy with. It's a dream to work with those type of fruits. So Amoureuses, of course, you have the apprehension of of the appellation, but it's somehow it's a very strong it's got a very strong personality. It's delicate and strong at the same time. It's fine and powerful. It's got all of this in the wine.
And they're lovely young, and they age really well. In fact, being the dedicated professional that I am, I did my homework last night, and it also being my wife's birthday. I opened up a bottle of 1996 Les Amoureuses from Fred Munier, which is perfectly mature and was absolutely delicious. Just to get a bit of Amoureuses going in the bloodstream.
Bravo.
Voila.
Ben, it's amazing that you say Musigny because so many of the guests on JMIB have also said Musigny. So it'd be great to convince Devogway to let a little bit go, to allow a little bit more inspiration.
Good luck with that, Michael.
To maybe drum up the price of Musigny, because there'll be even more producers and more excitement around it. But anyway, I thought.
If you can extract some fruit from them, I'll be happy to make the wine for you.
Absolutely. Well, look, it's great to have seen a good crowd of you enjoying the usual delights of Deloyo. I'm already missing Hong Kong. It's only a month or so ago that I was there, but we'll be back in the spring. Between now and then, I hope we'll do at least one or a couple more of these Zoom tastings. But thank you for being there, and a particularly big thanks to Ben for showing us such a great range of wines.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
By the way, the best present you could possibly give yourself is a year's subscription to the Jasper Morris Inside Burgundy website for just £95. This gives you access to all my tasting notes, in-depth information on domains, vintages and appellations, and latest news from Burgundy. And there's a bonus, some really interesting reports on Pinot and Chardonnay from other regions outside Burgundy. Go on then, subscribe.